Let us now talk about functions with default values. Before we go ahead to understand the concept, let me give you the requirement or need where you can use functions with default values. Let us say I am required to develop a software for a bank. Almost 99% of the people get an interest rate of say 11% or 10%, whatever value you decide. But there is a small 1% of senior citizens who are supposed to get more than 10%. Let's say they get 12%. So what I can do is I can write a function whose prototype looks something like this. Name is interest, return type is float. It accepts the principal, time and rate of interest. But here if you look at the prototype, I have initialized the last variable with interest rate as 10. So what I am telling here is for almost everybody the rate of interest automatically is going to be calculated as 10. Only for those people who I want the rate to be calculated as 12, I will modify this R value and I'll make it 12. Let's run through the program, then things will be really clear. I have declared a variable called as float amount. I am, let us say, in the first case, I am calling this function called interest with the amount 7,000 and time being 5 years. Since I am not passing the rate of interest, it will automatically calculate using 10% as the rate of interest on 7,000 for 5 years, and it will give you the simple or the default interest rate. Okay, so that is what you're going to get in the first step. Now what I am doing in the next step is I am again calling interest with the same amount, same time. But here I don't want the default interest of 10%. I want an interest of 11%. So only in the case where I want a different rate of interest to be used, I am passing this value 11. Wherever I require the default value of 10, I do not require to pass the parameter for R, or I do not need to send R value to this function interest. Now let us take a look at this particular function called as interest. So what is happening here is whatever 7,000 is copied into principal, 5 is copied into time. Since R value is not sent from here to here, it will take the default interest rate of 10 and put it into R, and it will return P into T into R upon 100 back to amount, and it will print whatever is the amount will be printed out here. This is the first case where we want the default rate of interest to be used. Let us say the second calculation is for senior citizens. In that case, I am required to pass the amount. I am passing the time. Since I want a different rate of interest, 11 gets copied into R. If we had forgotten to send 11, it would have calculated using 10. So this is an example of a function using default argument values. So the default argument value of R happens to be 10. Wherever I don't send the R value, it will take the default value. Where I require the actual value, I am putting this particular stuff here and sending it across. So this is an example of a function with default values. Now we can go ahead and try to understand this concept in much detail. So once we've taken a look at the program, it's really not too difficult to understand. We can just keep this at the side so that we understand it much better. We need not pass all the values or arguments. Here I am not passing the rate of interest. So this is an example of a function accepting or working with default arguments. Now, what does it do? It assigns default values to the formal argument. What is the formal argument here? This R, this PTR are not declared or used here. These are local variables to interest. So P takes 7,000, T takes 5. But this R value, if I don't send, it will automatically take the value 10. So the default value of 10 is assigned to R. So what is the rule? The argument which does not have a matching argument in the function call is substituted. 7,000 has one argument, 5 is with T. This fellow does not have any matching argument, so this is substituted with 10. it will always start looking from the rightmost side, because it takes the first left, puts it to the first left, takes the second left, puts it to the left. Since the rightmost is not there, it will substitute with the default value. So default values are assigned only in the function prototype. So when you're declaring the prototype, you will assign the default values. So the assigned to the arguments as we initialize the value. So as we declare and do it, this is initialized and then used when the parameter is not sent. Now I have already shown you this thing, but let us try to re-emphasize through an example. I have got float, interest, amount, time and rate of interest. This is the prototype declaration where I say it is 0.15. So now, of course, this is not syntax. I'm just showing you the concept. So I've ignored all the syntax, but good to have syntax. Simple interest, if I call it with interest 5005, then the interest of 0.15 will be automatically substituted. Now when I'm saying SI, interest 5005 and 0.2, this 0.15 will not be used. This 0.2 will be used. So we are overriding this argument in this case. In this case, since the last argument is missing, we are using the default rate of 0.15. Let's try to further understand a little more about this particular default arguments, because it's a nice concept which can save you a lot of code. So in the case where I showed you before, 0.15 is the default argument. So 0.15 is the default value or the default argument value. Now this value of 0.15 is used when the argument is missing in the function call. So in this case, the third argument is missing, so 0.15 is used. Then an argument in the prototype can have a default value only if all arguments to the right of it have default values. So all of these fellows should, okay, so what is trying to say, an argument in the prototype can have a default value if all arguments to the right of it have default values. Since this is the last one, there's nothing to the right, so this is the only one which has the default value. If I want to give default value for time also, only if I give default value for rate, then I can give default value for time. I just cannot give for time and ignore for rate. So everything to the right should have first been assigned default values. If you want to give default values for all three, first this fellow and this, or let's say you want to give default values for two of them, you just cannot give for amount and time. You have to give for rate and only time. If you want to give for amount, you have to exchange time and amount, give it for rate and then bring amount this side and give it for amount also. So what is the moral of the story? As a consequence, default values are assigned from right to left. Default values can be only provided in the function prototype. This is the function prototype and not in the function definition. Default values may be a constant value like this. They can be a value of a variable, a global variable, or they can even be a call to another function. For example, I can call a function called square root here. Rate is assigned square root of something. Okay, that is also possible. Now, what are uses of default values? It is useful in situations like I told you, where some arguments most of the time have the same value. It provides additional flexibility to the programmer, and you can add new arguments to existing functions, and you can combine functions doing the same thing into a single function. You don't want to create additional functions doing almost the same thing. That is the advantage of default values.